You good, mate? Long time no see.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, and I've been travelling around a bit, so sorry for being out of action, but I believe you've been working on a bit of a project.
I have. So, look, we've been mentioning to our members how we're working on this portfolio compiler. Now, just to make our members aware, we often use Quant Analyzer in analysing the trades that we get through MetaTrader 4.
Yep.
Those that are using Quant Analyzer will be quite familiar with that process. It's very sort of easy to import your trade history from MT4 into Quant Analyzer. That now allows you to compile your portfolios and analyse them and reconfigure them. And but for those members who don't have Quant Analyzer,
and that's a commercial software, isn't it?
That is commercial software, and you can get Quant Analyzer separately for a cheaper price, or you can get it as part of a package with Strategy Quant.
Yep.
But a lot of our members don't have Strategy Quant or Quant Analyzer, so I thought we need some sort of way to accommodate those members who don't have that software. So I've developed this portfolio compiler in Microsoft Access.
And everyone should have access to Access?
And everyone should have Microsoft Access that has the Office 365 suite of products. They'll be able to run this program.
Yep.
The reason we use Access is that rather than say Excel, is that Access has a bit more power and storage capability.
Yep.
So I've done this compiler within Microsoft Access, but there are two files that we'll be using. One is the compiler itself, which is within Access.
Yep.
And then output files generated from Microsoft Access are then used within Microsoft Excel. So we've got a spreadsheet as well, which we use in conjunction with our...
And we hope to show everyone that right now, is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool.
So the aim is there'll probably be a lot of questions arising from the use of this compiler. We're just giving an overview today of its main functionality, but it's quite comprehensive, and there'll probably be a lot of questions that our members might be asking, but we might do future videos to respond to those specific questions. So
over to you, mate.
All right, mate. So before any more talk, we'll get on to the Microsoft Access database first.
Good day.
Great. So here we are, Fred. When we open up Microsoft Access, the file, they just double click on the file and it opens up the Microsoft Access database in front of them. They'll be presented with this main menu. And in the main menu, we've got basically three separate components. One is the workflow and the strategy list, which we'll get into and show members what that's about. The other is the trade history list, and this is what does a lot of the analysis, the compiler function. Now, when people open up Microsoft Access, they'll be presented with this screen, our members, but just be aware, if you go over to the left here and you open up this navigation menu, you get to the back end of the database where you can see the individual tables of the database. So we've got the workflow tables, the trade tables, and the strategy tables here. And these are all of the queries and forms that drive the database. Members don't need to worry about the queries or the forms, but it is useful understanding where the tables are located for the workflows, the trades, and the strategies.
But can they use it without getting into the back end?
They can use it without getting into the back end, but say for instance they've loaded a lot of data already into the database and now they want to delete some of that data. It's useful getting into the back end here of how to quickly get to the back end data so they can then select what data they want to delete, and there's a particular process we use in how to do that.
Yep.
So it is useful people knowing how they can get into the back end of the database, but it's just by opening and closing this navigation box here. So when we're presented with these three key main options, the first thing people want to do is they want to get the workflow trade data that they've generated from our ATS in-house workflow process. They want to be able to get that into this database.
So this system relies on them using our in-house program.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring up our in-house program just to refresh members. So what we want to do is we want to use the data generated from our workflow process particularly the data generated from this EA called the one chart trader, which is the trader we use at the end of the process, which runs all of the strategies that we've developed through our workflow process. And when we run that one chart trader, if we go into the expert properties here of the one chart trader, we see that we have the ability to record all the trade history. So when we want to capture data from our workflow process and put that into the database, we need to select this to true. This way, we'll run an example, show them where the data is located and how we get that data into the database. But before we get that data into the database, the first thing we've got to do is set up the criteria associated with each workflow process that we undertake. We need to load that into the database. So I'll just come back to the database now.
Sorry, Rich, you talk about workflow process. You say there's multiple workflow. Do you want to just clarify?
Yes, so we've got here, with our ATS workflow process, we've got about 8 or 9 algorithms which run the entire process for a single workflow. So for instance, let's say we're doing a workflow for a portfolio of 60 markets across a history of 30 years history. The workflow process will generate the trade histories of all of those 60 markets, and it needs to be assigned to a workflow name. For instance, a workflow called 60 market portfolio created on this particular date. Now the reason we do that is that when we run the algorithms associated with the workflow process, it generates a trade history, and we want to know when all of this data is in the database, we want to know how to, what was a workflow that generated that data.
Yeah, so people may only ever have one workflow process.
Yes.
But others might choose to do metals as opposed to commodities as opposed to...
Exactly.
FX.
Also, as members are aware, we undertake our workflow process annually. So each year we come up with a different workflow process. So we therefore need to have the correct nomenclature to assign to a particular workflow so we can identify it for future purposes. So we might do a workflow in 2020, a workflow in 2021, a workflow in 2022, and we're capturing all of the data associated with those workflows in the database. So let's just quickly now, before we capture the data from a particular workflow into our database, we'll go and assign the creation of a workflow into our database. The first thing we do is we select this button here, which is the creation of our workflow. So when we click that here, we're presented with a fresh screen, and the first thing we want to do now is create, let's say we've come off the back of a workflow process at today's date, which is 2nd of October, and we want to create a workflow that captures all of that data. So what we do here, I'm going to assign this a particular name. So we'll call it workflow, in this example, 1. I'm just giving it any particular name so sure. I can refer to it. And I created it on the 2nd of October 2022. So,
but this can be anything, any text they want.
We can put whatever we like here. So I've called it workflow 1. I'm going to put a little semicolon there. No, just to specify it's 2nd of October. And let's say this is a 60 market portfolio. Okay, so I've got my rudimentary information in there. So I've created my first workflow. Obviously, as time goes on and you create more and more workflows, the listing will get bigger and bigger and bigger. But you'll notice that the ID automatically assigns a number, a unique number to it, 4 in this case. At the moment, don't worry about the active button or the initial deposit button or the initial deposit field, but we've established the necessary information. So now we've created that workflow. The second thing we want to do is we want to get details regarding the strategies that have been developed in that workflow. So to get the details associated with those strategies, the first thing we need to do is go back to our ATS in-house process. And the first thing we want to do is find the tester file that contains the details regarding the strategies we're using for that particular workflow.
Right.
So
people should be well and truly familiar with this by now.
Exactly, Fred. I'm just going to the tester directory, going to files, go into ATS 24. People should know where to find this now. And it's called the tradelist.csv file. So we open that up. And just so people are familiar with this, you'll notice that this particular file is the file that runs all of the particular strategies for this workflow. This is an end stage file created from the entire process, and in this case, all of the strategies are detailed here, and the particular symbol names and references and all of the configuration settings for each of the strategies are listed here.
So when you called it 60, there were 60 different instruments you're trading.
That was just an example. We might have to adjust that when we work out exactly how many instruments we are actually trading. But now, when your algorithms develop this trade list file, your algorithms assign a unique number called the magic number to each of these particular strategies. Now, before we get this listing into our database, we need to reassign the magic numbers, because over the course of time, as we're developing more and more workflow processes, we've really got to ensure that each of the strategies has a unique number assigned.
Or else there'd be confusion between the strategies.
That's right.
Between the workflows. Yeah.
So what we'll do, we're going to now renumber our magic numbers for this particular workflow from 1 up to however many strategies here. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to change that to 1, put a little formula here to make that 2, and go right down to the end and reassign all of the numbers. So in this instance, I've now renumbered my magic numbers for this particular workflow from 1 right through to 272, as there are 272 discrete strategies.
So just as a side note, of course, being a one chart trader, if you wanted to try and run this on the standard configuration of MT4, you would need effectively 272 charts open.
That's right.
So that's the benefit of using the one chart trader.
Yes, so Fred's done some marvellous work here where all of our instructional, the instructions for our entire portfolio is contained in one file, which allows us therefore to operate this off one chart as opposed to multiple different charts. So now we've assigned all of the magic numbers now to go into the database. I'm now going to go back to our database and go to the workflow that we've established, and I'm going to double click on this workflow, and you'll notice now that the summary details of the workflow are contained up here. If we want to attach any attachments associated with this workflow, we can use this attachment function here. This is just a nice handy feature.
Just somewhere to park your files.
Park your file, you can park your EAs, you can park any notes,
So how many
like.
attachments can we have here?
You can have unlimited attachments. All you do is you find where the attachment is that you want to add. In this case, I've got this thing called questions, which might relate to this strategy. And when I add it, you'll see it's now linked to the database. I might therefore want to add a trend following notes here. Notice how we're just slowly building up attachments, which all link back to this specific workflow.
So in theory, then you could load up the complete strategy. All the EAs and everything could be loaded into.
Exactly. As you'll see, I'll show a completed workflow at the end of this, which will show that I've loaded the core EAs into the attachments, so that it's all housed in one location.
That's pretty handy.
Yeah, a one-stop shop for all of our processes.
So how do you get to the attachments? Can you open those attachments later, or how does that work?
So when let's say I add this attachment here, which I think is in Microsoft Word, and I attach it into here. If you want to open it, you just double-click on it. As you see, when you double-click on it, it just navigates to the file and opens it up for you.
Excellent.
Okay, so that's the attachment function. It's just a nice, handy function for you. Now, we notice here, we've got associated with this particular workflow, we've now got a strategies listing. Now, as we've just shown you, in our ATS in-house workflow process, we now want to get all of these strategies, which have now got these renumbered magic numbers, into this particular workflow. Now, how we do that is we just go to our first record here, highlight the first record, go down the entire listing and highlight the entire listing, copy that entire listing, and all we do now is we click to the first record, highlight it, so you'll notice that the entire record is shown up, and just go Control V or paste append, and you'll see that we're now pasting 272 records into this. And you'll notice that that's the information from this trade list CSV file, which is now linked to workflow 1, and it's now in our database. So now that we've, as you can imagine, we've now assigned the strategies and the workflow. Now all we've got to do is assign the trades associated with that workflow into our database. And I'll show you how to do that. So what we do, the first thing we do is when we're running MetaTrader and we're using our one chart trader, make sure that the record all trade history is set to true. So we've now set our trade history and we're now ready to run our first run on our first market. Let's say our first market is Euro USD and we want to record the trade history and then capture it into our database. So I've set this to true. You've got to set your password here to activate the one chart trader and define the symbol you want to trade, the date range, etc., the spread, etc., and then run it, and it will copy all of the trade history into a particular file, which I'll show you where to navigate that to, and then you copy and paste that into your database.
And you've got to do that for every instrument.
That's right. So we said we had about 257 strategies. I think that's about across 60 markets or so. But fortunately, we've got to do this 60 times as opposed to 257 times because
272 actually.
272, that's right. So in this case, Euro USD might have, when we go to Euro USD here, we'll notice that Euro USD might have 6. Let's see how many strategies it's working off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 strategies for Euro USD, which trades as one when using a one chart trader.
Yeah, so all the trades that are taken when you run this on the one chart trader is across those 6 strategies within the Euro.
That's right. That's right. So let's now run this. So here we go. We're now going to run it. I'm going to set the visualizer off. We've got a long run here from 1970 up to current day. Let's run it. Remember, you need to renumber those magic numbers in the trade list file before you generate the trade list because it will link it to the magic number which you need in the database.
And the other thing to remember, of course, is once you've edited the trade list, make sure you close it before you try and run it.
Yes, good point. Right, so we'll run this now. Here we go, Fred, it's running. It's now generating an equity curve, as we can see.
Still got a way to go, so we'll just have to pause here.
We'll pause here and come back to it once it's been finalised, this run. Nice kick. So here we go, Fred. It's now run. We've got an equity curve generated. We've got a report generated. So now what we want to do is we want to go to the files that were generated through this process. Okay, so we go to ATS 24. And in here, we see that we've got the trade list file that has already been generated. And now we've got the trade list history for the Euro USD. If we open that up, if you remember, this is the algorithms Fred's developed that punches out the trade history data, including all of the costs associated with the trade, such as the spread, the commissions, swaps, etc. All the information's here. Now what we want to do is you want to get this into our database. But now this is for Euro USD. Now in a similar way to what we did before, highlight the entire trade history, Control C, copy it. Then we want to go to our database. We go to the trade history listing, and all we do is we highlight that first row and go Control V. You'll see that we're now pasting 515 records. And a couple of key things here. You'll notice now that each trade, we've got a magic number assigned to each trade, which links to the strategy. And we've got all of the trade history captured here for that particular run. So that's how we get the trade data in, and how we get the strategies into the database, and how we create our workflow process. So what I'm going to do now, Fred, is come to a completed effort to show you what it looks like once we've got the entire workflow process into the database.
So the users would do this for every instrument that they're interested in from that trade list?
Yes, correct.
So rather than sit here and do this 60 times, here's one we prepared earlier.
Here's one we prepared earlier. That's right. Look, it does take some time to get the information in here, but it's not that arduous. Once you get into the rhythm of it, it's quite a quick process.
But what is really interesting is you see the total trade profile. Every trade is shown there in its glory.
Exactly. All right, so let's go to here's one we've done earlier example. So here we are, Fred. When we come into this particular compiler, we'll notice that I've created 3 separate workflows here. One created on the 15th of July 2022, another on the 28th of the 6th, and another on the 1st of the 7th. These are 3 separate workflows, all doing different things. When I come into these examples, let's say we go into workflow 1, and I double click on that. You'll see here how we've got workflow 1 created on this particular date. We've got notes about the particular workflow, 56 marker portfolio, etc., what the outer sample component of the testing was, if any, and all the information there. And you'll notice that the attachments here, in this example, what I'm storing for these workflows is a symbol list, because that's important to know what symbols were associated with your workflow.
And what spread you used at the time.
And what spread. So if we open up that symbol list, you'll see these are the symbols, these are the spreads, and this is the history start for that symbol listing. You'll also notice that I've also put the set files that I've created for my particular projects in here. I've also the stage 4 iteration process, which is a JPEG file. It's just a picture of the settings used for my iteration process, and the trade list file and all the strategies associated. That's enough information here that I can refer back to later and reconstruct this if I needed to, but it's all in there. You'll also notice that all of the strategies are listed here, and if I now double click on this strategy, so let's say for instance I want to go to the trades associated with AUD USD. If I double click on there, you'll notice that all of my trades associated with that workflow for AUD USD are listed here.
Very good. So that's per magic number there by the look of that.
In this case, it's per strategy. So this is for the BBB strategy. This is for the BBR strategy.
So that filters out from the big long trade list or the trade history specifically for each particular strategy.
If I want to actually go to the complete listing, I come back out here, I go to trade history list, and you'll notice here that we've got a listing of about 35,000 trades stored in this database currently. Obviously, we don't want to be working with a huge listing like that. So this is a simple way of navigating quickly to the trades that are associated with each of the individual strategies.
And can we then look to see how profitable that strategy was?
Yes, we'll do this when we get to the compiler. But so now you can see how we've created several workflows, we've added information in, and we've added our trade history in. Now, a lot of members will say, oh, well, what happens when we want to delete information? And this is where you need to be aware of this 3-tiered process. So if you can imagine, the first tier is our workflow name. The second tier are the strategies that link to that workflow name. And the third tier are the trades that link to the strategies that link to the workflow name. So if you're going to be deleting things, you need to understand that hierarchical order. So when you, for instance, want to delete a strategy, you first want to delete the trades associated with that strategy, then the strategy,
Why would you want to do that? Why wouldn't you just leave it all in there and filter it out as you go?
You could, but what happens is once the linkages are broken between the workflow name, the strategy and the trades, you'll still retain the data in here, but it won't link to any magic number and it won't link to the workflow.
What I'm asking is, why would you want to delete anything? Why not just keep it all there?
Yeah, exactly. Keep it all. But what you might find is, let's say you've done a workflow process in October, and you redo that workflow process with 2 months of additional data in December. You might want to delete the data up until October and replace it with a complete fresh set of data for the extra 2 months if you wanted to do that. But so if you did want to do that and you want to eliminate historical data from your database, always start from trades first, then strategy, then workflow in the deletion process. We might have to go into that later with our members, but it's just something to keep in mind.
My view on that would be just to create a new workflow process.
Why not?
Yeah.
The good thing about this is once we create one database here, it's recorded as a file. So let's say in this example, that database you just saw was this one here. If I want to create another workflow process, I can just copy that file and then delete everything and start afresh again and create a new database. So you can create as many of these databases as you like. You don't have to have it all stored in one database.
Yep, understand.
So back to that database now. Now we'll move on to the compiler.
This is the exciting bit. Right?
This is the bit that pulls all the information together. This is what is the main workhorse engine of the database and allows us to select and deselect strategies, workflows, trades from our process to generate a compiled selection of strategies, which then we take to our Excel spreadsheet for further analysis. So at the moment, you'll notice how we've got these columns here. So we've got 3 separate windows. We've got a window that defines the individual workflows comprised in the database, the strategies that are contained in the database in this section here, and the trades associated with what has been selected from these listings on the left. So if I want to select all of my workflows, I want to make sure that all of my active buttons are highlighted. And I also want to make sure that all of my active strategies are highlighted. So in this case, we'll notice that some of them haven't been highlighted. So what we want to do is, if we want to make all strategies active, click on this button, make all strategies active, and that should highlight everything in the listing here. Make all workflows active. If you wanted to make them inactive, you just toggle on and toggle off. But in this case, I want them all active. And you'll notice now that this database therefore has got 35,000 trades now compiled into this trade history listing, which is of all of the 3 workflow processes. But let's say I only want one of the workflow processes. The easiest way, if I wanted to do that, would be to turn off, let's say I want workflow 1. I turn off workflow 2, workflow 3, press the refresh button, and you'll notice now that the trade listing has now gone to 17,315, which is the trades associated with workflow 1. I can turn on and turn off individual strategies here. Alternatively, when you come to, if you double click on any of these items, such as the workflow here, you'll come back to this screen, which we've already seen. You can activate and deactivate strategies from this listing here by selecting in the active column here which ones are active, or activate all or deactivate all. That's a quick guideline. So in this case, I'm capturing the information from workflow 1, and you'll notice over here this has compiled all of the trades. Now we can do some sorting and elimination from this process here. I tend not to. I tend to use my Excel spreadsheet as a basis to do all of that. But you'll notice that now that I've compiled the trades that I want to be taken over to my portfolio analysis function in my Excel spreadsheet, there are certain buttons up here which create output files from this listing created here.
Remind me again, Rich, while we've done this in Access and not started in Excel and stayed in Excel, because we're going to take this now into Excel, aren't we?
We are. Look, the main reason is that the storage capacity. It allows you to store vast amounts of data in this process, enables you to go back to old workflows, etc. If you did it within Excel, you'd be limited by the size restrictions of the file, so you'll be having many different Excel files retained for your workflow processes. Also, Excel won't retain your attachments like we've shown you here, all of these things.
Yeah, so there's some really valid reasons why you'd want to stay with Access.
Yeah, it's just handy. It's a quick way to get lots of information out of your database. I find it very helpful. So there are 3 buttons here. Now, the first thing is, at the moment, we've got all of these strategies and their trades. It creates summarized information here. So if we go to, let's say, Bitcoin, we'll see that we've got what we call a min date and the max date of the trade history. We know we've got history from the 17th of the 6th, 2015 up to 16th of the 7th, 2022 in the database. We know that there are 64 trades retained in the database for Bitcoin. We've got some broad stats here regarding those trades and information here. You can see how it's capturing information which is helpful for our analysis in these particular fields, and it's quite comprehensive as you scroll over. We've got a button up here called Generate Trade List. So from the captured information in my compiler, if I wanted to create a trade list, so we've already talked about the trade list file that runs our portfolio, but let's say I've got a trade list generated from 3 workflows that I want to create, and then create a separate trade list of those 3 portfolios to run as one. I just click this button, Trade List, and we'll have a new trade list created, which we can then copy into an Excel spreadsheet, relabel the magic numbers, and save it as a CSV file. And this will operate as a trade list CSV file for an enhanced portfolio that might be across multiple workflows. Here, the portfolio analytics is this information is carried over into Microsoft Excel. So this is all of the portfolio analytics that will be used by Excel for analysis. We've also got portfolio returns, which is a by market over the top row across the entire date range that we're assessing here. It creates a
month by
month. And trade details. If someone wants to analyse all of their trade history associated with an entire portfolio collection, this generates a trade history list of the entire selection in your portfolio. Another good little handy feature here, if I only want a restricted list here, I might set the date range from 1st of the 1st, 2000 up to current day, as opposed to 1st of the 1st, 1770. As soon as I press refresh, the trades are now restricted to that date range. So,
you've got history going back to 1770, have you?
1970. So 1st of the 1st, my entire history I think here is 1970, so I'll do the long range one here. But you'll notice how you can use this date functionality here to restrict the listing to whatever you want.
That's pretty handy, because that way you don't have to keep going back to MT4 to rerun those stats. You can get them out of here.
Yeah.
And this is done based on the trade date. So in other words, it won't show a trade until after that date.
That's right.
Starting from.
That's right. All right, so that gives a brief overview of the database. Now we can move on to the spreadsheet. So Fred, here we are. We've just opened up the spreadsheet, which accompanies our database. It's called the Portfolio Creator spreadsheet. And you'll notice that at the bottom of the spreadsheet, there are a number of tabs here. The tabs we're interested in is this tab called Analytics Dump, which receives information from the database. The Returns Dump, which also receives information from the database. And then this is what does the crunching, these particular tabs here. This does the analysis for the raw portfolio without any adjustments. This is where we can turn off or turn on particular return streams to look at their impact on the overall portfolio. This is some mapping functionality where we can look at the particular equity curves of individual markets and turn them off or turn them on, depending on...
Well, you're getting me excited now, Rich. Why don't we put some data in and see what...
Let's do it.
Like.
All right, so the first thing we want to do is get some information into the spreadsheet from, for instance, this selection I've created here. I therefore am happy with this selection and I'm ready to now import that into my spreadsheet. I come here and press Portfolio Analytics Dump. This therefore generates a long listed file of 55 records. I highlight the entire selection here by clicking on this left-hand menu selection, press Control-C, and now I come to my spreadsheet and I go to my Analytics Dump and go to this very first row here in column A7 and go Control-V. This therefore just simply pastes that information from that data dump into the spreadsheet. Now I need the returns information from my database. To do that, go back to the database, then select Portfolio Returns Dump button. This therefore, in a similar way, highlight the entire information presented in the dump. Control-C copies it, then come to my spreadsheet, go to the returns dump section of the spreadsheet, go to column F7 and press Control-V, and that pastes all of that information in there. It just takes a second to do, won't be too long.
F7 as opposed to A7.
F7 as opposed to A7. So now all the information is in. The spreadsheet takes over and does all of the calculation. So it takes some time to refresh, but you'll notice now that the raw information or the raw portfolio tab now displays the raw information from that dump. There's a lot of information here to enable you to analyze things from without any adjustments of the portfolio. You've got all of this information here, and you've got some graphical charts which say, well, this is the equity curve produced from a raw portfolio that's dumped from the...
When you say raw portfolio, that's all the trades out of all the strategies.
The entire selection that was taken from the dump, from the database, is now presented as a consolidated portfolio here. We'll notice that there are a couple of big outliers here.
They're pretty fancy, aren't
they are, and we want to obviously understand why they are so big, and I'll show you how we do that. But this is all of the raw information. Now we look at it now for what we need to process this information, look at the logic, make sure we're happy with it before we select this as our portfolio to trade with. I now come to, therefore, the portfolio compiler spreadsheet, and this is where we can turn on and turn off individual markets here in this yellow column here by simply putting a 1 into the market that we want to turn on. Turn off.
What are some of the reasons you might want to turn something off?
So a good reason is, let's say there's a particular return stream that has strong negative skew. I might, as a philosophical stand, say I only want to accept return streams with positive skew, and you might want to turn off those with negative skew as a risk management function. You can therefore look at the skew of all of the individual return streams. If there are any negative skew items here, in this case there's one here, you want to turn that off. So put a 1 in here and you'll notice that it will turn off that entire row.
We wouldn't expect too many negative skews, would we, in the way we've generated?
There should be very few. The nature of our process generates positively skewed outcomes, but there might be a few examples. And it'll be for some strange reason that we need to assess why. Another reason is sometimes, for instance, swap can sometimes amount to a very large portion of overall performance. Now, the problem with swap is that we always know at any point in time what the current swap is, but when we're undertaking a back test of, say, 30, 40 years, we've got no knowledge of what the swap was over the course of that entire back test. So the assumption is that when we undertake our back test, it uses a current swap and assumes that that's been constant over the entire 30 to 40 years. That's actually not the case. We'll find that, for instance, in examples here. As we're going down this column here of swap, we'll see that there are some extraordinary examples of extreme swap. Here we go here. Notice that we've got $776,000 worth of swap, positive swap, contributed by this market, which is spot crude. Now, that is a legitimate amount based on current swap that would be generated over that entire backtest, but we know that that's not going to be the case in the backtest.
So comparing the swap figure to the total net profit, it swamps the result, doesn't it?
Absolutely swamps it. So let's say when we went back to our raw portfolio, there were a couple of extreme return streams here. We can identify what they were by highlighting on the chart, and it should tell you which return stream is generated, but these are from spot Brent, spot crude, that are generating these extreme examples. I might, for conservative reasons, want to turn these off from this particular analysis. I therefore come in here, turn that off, and turn that off.
It would be great to get that result, but the reality is we don't know what the swap was over that
Exactly.
time frame. So
All it's doing is it's significantly biasing the portfolio result to an extreme optimistic level. So just for conservative reasons, we might want to turn that off. So when we come to the result of the compiled result, we'll see that it takes a while for these charts to refresh. We'll see that those extreme examples have been turned off now. There might be a host of other reasons why you'd want to turn off or turn on particular return streams, but this enables you to do it quickly and to analyse the overall impact on the portfolio.
and you get a quick visual impression of what the impact is.
Yes, exactly. Now, what happens, we've got another function in here called mapping. Now, what this does is this looks at the overall equity curve of the entire portfolio and where the drawdowns occurred in the entire portfolio, the maximum drawdown. So in this example, we'll notice that the maximum drawdown actually was at this level here.
We've seen that before, haven't we? When we see it at the beginning of any...
We have. And we might want to know, well, what are the markets that are contributing to that excessive drawdown? So that's why we align this red arrow here. And you'll notice that underneath this portfolio chart, we've got all of the contributing markets for the portfolio. And as we scroll down here, we can see which is contributing to this excessive drawdown. And as we scroll down here, we should be able to find which are the markets that are doing that. And you might elect to turn them off, those particular markets, if they're contributing to an excessive drawdown.
It's also interesting, it shows you where the markets actually start to trade, probably based on our
trade history.
data.
That's right. So a good example here, London Sugar only started trading from here because we had no data over this period here. But you'll notice here we've got a fairly high drawdown in this section here. You might want to find out, well, which are the markets contributing to that drawdown, and by this process you can find out which of the markets and then turn off or turn on those markets.
Can we turn them off at this view? Or do we
yes,
have to go
so
back?
let's say we wanted, I'll find an example that we might want to turn off. Okay, here, soybeans is obviously contributing significantly to this drawdown here. You'll see that the drawdown profile of soybeans is contributing. If you want to turn it off, come to this yellow column here, press 1, and that will therefore turn off the chart. That therefore, when you come back to the portfolio compiler, will turn off soybeans, and the summary chart here will therefore exclude, it's just coming now, exclude soybean from that analysis. If I come back to the mapping function and want to turn it back on, just turn it from a 1 to a 0, and the chart comes back on and becomes active in the portfolio. And you can do this to as many of the individual markets as you want. So this allows you to massage the overall portfolio equity curve and the drawdown profile by virtue of which markets you turn on and turn off.
So are we promoting fine-tuning at this level? Or, I mean,
yes,
philosophically,
philosophically, this is a form of curve fitting. This is a classic example of curve fitting. So I tend not to use it much. I only use it for extreme examples where there's a clear logic. The swap, to turn off things. Otherwise, I tend to accept things as they are. But for instance, let's say you had, instead of a broad portfolio of markets across a diversified portfolio, let's say you're only dealing with a small asset class such as equities alone or Bitcoin alone, there might be examples in there with extreme, when you get extreme correlations occurring in those particular markets, you might want to reduce your exposure to particular markets. And this mapping functionality enables you to achieve that quite well.
Excellent.
So once all of the adjustments have occurred through the mapping process or the turning on or turning off through the compiler process, it therefore generates a summary of the end result. And in the summary, you can see what the overall equity curve of the portfolio is, what the drawdown profile is of the portfolio, the adjusted portfolio, which of the return streams are contributing to that portfolio, and it gives you summarised statistics of the entire portfolio performance over that time frame. What it also does is generates a monthly table of returns, both in dollar terms and in percentage terms over the entire test period. So in this example, we're going from 1970 up to 2022. We've got a complete profile here of everything in this portfolio that's contributing to that. So Fred, that's pretty well it.
Pretty exciting, mate. I think you've done a good job putting all that together. So hopefully people can understand it, but and start using it. We'd really love some feedback on how this is working for people. But the power now is in the hand of the member who wants to fine tune and understand what the makeup of his portfolio is.
And the good thing is members shouldn't be scared to test this out, take it for a road test. If they corrupt the file, don't worry, because you can always download a copy of a fresh file. You can save these multiple times as separate files. So, get into it. Have a look around, take it for a road test, and see you on the forum if you've got any particular queries about it.
Sounds great. Well, good luck with everything, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks very much, Fred. See you, everyone. Bye.